Okay, let's do it. I think this is the last day we'll be reading Gingerbread Girl. Hopefully, we had a good class discussion. The body count, I don't know, is getting pretty high. Nicole, Deke, probably the guy on the beach, and probably either M or Pickering. Probably Pickering, right? He's probably gonna die. All right, hopefully in a horrible way because he's a mean person. All right, let's do it. Right after the yellow, excuse me, yellow. Hopefully, my voice holds up. I am fighting something, a little bit of a cold, I think, or allergies. I'm not sure. She tried as hard as she could, ran as hard as she could, and the sand, cold and wet, where she was running, soothed her fiery heel a little. Remember, he bit it, but she could still get into nothing resembling her old gait. She looked back and saw him gaining, putting everything he had into a final sprint. Ahead of her, the rainbows were fading as the day grew relentlessly brighter and hotter. Could be a little symbolism there. She tried as hard as she could and knew it wasn't going to be enough. She could outrun an old lady, she could outrun an old man, she could outrun her poor, sad husband, but she couldn't outrun the mad blank behind her. He was going to catch her. She looked for a weapon to hit him with when he did, but there was still nothing. She saw the charred remains of someone's beach party campfire, but it was too far ahead and too far inland, just below the place where the dunes and sea oats took over from the beach. He would catch her even sooner if she diverted in that direction, where the sand was soft and treacherous. Things were bad enough down here by the water. She could hear him closing in, panting harshly and snorting back blood from his broken nose. She could even hear the rapid whack of his sneakers on the damp sand. Remember, she kicked him right in the face with her heel. Unfortunately, he bit her heel, so she can't run as fast. She wished so hard for someone else on the beach that for a moment she hallucinated a tall, white haired guy with a big bent nose and rough, dark skin. Then she realized her yearning mind had conjured her own father, last hope, and the illusion blew away. Right in the middle here. He got close enough to reach out for her. His hand batted the back of her shirt, almost caught the fabric, fell away. Next time it wouldn't. She swerved into the water, splashing in first to her ankles, then to her calves. It was the only thing she could think of. The last thing. She had an idea, unformed, inarticulate, of either swimming away from him or at least facing him in the water, top of the next column, where they might be on more even terms, if nothing else. Water might slow the strokes of the awful scissors if she could get deep enough. Before she could throw herself forward and begin stroking, before she could even get as far in as her thighs, he grabbed her by the neck of her shirt and pulled her backward, dragging her towards the shore again. Em saw the scissors appear over her left shoulder and grabbed them. She tried to twist, but it was hopeless. Pickering had braced himself in knee-deep water, his legs apart, his feet planted firmly against the sand-sucking rush of the retreating waves. She tripped over one of them and fell against him. They splashed down together. Pickering's reaction was fast and unmistakable, even in the wet confusion, pushing and bucking and convulsive thrashing. Truth lit up in her head like fireworks on a dark night. He couldn't swim. Pickering couldn't swim. He had a house by the Gulf of Mexico, but he couldn't swim. And it made perfect sense. His visits to Vermilion Key had been dedicated to indoor sports. She rolled away from him, and he didn't try to grab her. He was sitting, chest deep, in the roiling boil of the waves, which were still agitated from the storm. And all his efforts, top of the next column, were focused on scrambling up and getting his precious respiration away from a medium it had never learned how to cope with. M would have spoken to him if she could have wasted the breath. Would have said, if I had known, we could have ended this right away, and that poor man would still be alive. Instead, she waded forward, reaching out and grabbed him. No, he screamed. He beat at her with both hands. They were empty. He must have lost the scissors when he fell, and he was too scared and disorganized to even make fists. No, don't. Let go, you blank. He loves that word, doesn't he? Em didn't. She dragged him deeper instead. He could have broken her hold and easily if he had been able to control his panic, but he couldn't. And she realized it was probably more than the inability to swim. He was having some sort of phobic reaction. What kind of man with a water phobia would own a house on the Gulf? He'd have to be crazy. That actually got her laughing. Although he was beating on her, his madly waving hand slapping first her right cheek, then hard on the left side of her head. A surge of green water slopped into her mouth, and she sputtered it back out. She dragged him deeper, top of the next column. Saw a big wave coming, smooth and glassy, just a little foam starting to break at the top, and shoved him into it, face first. His screams became choked gurgles that disappeared as he went under. He thrust and bucked and twisted in her grip. The big wave washed over her, and she held her breath. For a moment, they were both under. She could see him, his face contorted into a pale mask of fear and horror that rendered it inhuman, and so turned him into what he really was. A galaxy of grit lays between them and the green. One small, clueless fish zipped by. Pickering's eyes bulged from their sockets. His power haircut wafted. And this was what she watched. She watched it closely as a silver track of bubbles drifted up from her nose. And when the strands of hair reversed in direction, drifting in the direction of Texas rather than that of Florida, she shoved him with all her might and let him go. Then she planted her foot on the sandy bottom and pistoned upward. She rose into brilliant air, gasping. She tore breath after breath out of it, then began to walk backward, a step at each time. Oh, I wonder. Stephen King made sure he mentioned she was walking now, not running. I don't know. Maybe that's important. It was hard going, even in close to shore. The retreating wave, sucking past her hips and between her legs, was almost strong enough to qualify as an undertow. A little further out it would be. Further out still, it would become a rip. It was even a strong swimmer, top of the next column, would have little chance unless he kept his head and stroked sideways, cutting a long, slow angle back to safety. All right, just really quickly, as I'm losing my voice, unfortunately. In Maine, we actually do have like rip tides and undertow. If you've ever been at the beach and you just felt the sand, literally, like I have fallen before because the waves push out so much back to the, like, not the coast, the opposite, I guess, back to the deep water. It'll just like come in pretty hard. So because they had that storm earlier, there might be a rip tide. And so hopefully Pickering will just be gone. And if you've seen the map of Florida, it's probably like on the peninsula that dips down. There's part of it that does face Texas. It's a long ways away. So hopefully Pickering will just go out to sea. All right, back to the reading. I think we're almost done. We got like maybe one more chapter after, but that was definitely the climax, right? And now we got to go back. If that was the climax, he's not quite dead yet. You know, sometimes in horror movies, like the hand will come back. So he's not quite dead yet. But once he dies, now we have to have that what's called falling action. The pieces have to be put together. We got to figure that M is, you know, again, Amy's death. She's not going to get over it, but maybe it's something that she can deal with. She has some minor injuries, you know, the bite to the heel and stuff like that. Deke. All right, let's got to pick up the pieces here. All right, it's right after that walk thing. Walk. It was hard going, even in close to shore. The retreating wave sucking past her hips and between her legs was almost strong enough. We already read that. Top of the next column. She floundered, lost her balance, sat down, and another wave drenched her. Felt wonderful, cold and wonderful. For the first time since Amy's death, she had a moment of feeling good. Better than good, actually. Every part of her hurt, and she understood that she was crying again, but she felt divine. Em struggled to her feet, shirt sopping and stuck to her midriff. She saw some faded blue thing floating away. Looked down at herself, looked back, and realized she lost her shorts. It's all right. They were ruined anyway, she said, and began to laugh as she backed towards the beach. Now knee deep, now shin deep, now with only her feet in the boil. She could have stood there for a long time. The cold water almost doused the pain in her burning heel, and she was sure the salt was good for the wound. Didn't they say the human mouth was the most germ-laden living thing on earth? Yes, she said, still laughing. But who the hell is the... Then Pickering surfaced, screaming. He was now about 25 feet out. He waved wildly with both hands. "Help me," he screamed. "I can't swim." Top of the next column. "I know," Em said. She raised one hand in a bon voyage wave, twiddled the fingers. "And you might even meet a shark," Deke Hollis told me last week they were running. "Help," a wave buried him. She thought he might not emerge, but he did. He was now 30 feet out. 30 at least. Please." His vitality was nothing short of amazing, especially since what he was doing, flailing his arms at the water, mostly as if he thought he could fly away like a seagull. Counterproductive. Excuse me. That's one of our words right there, counterproductive. So it's actually doing worse than if he had done nothing at all. But he was drifting out further all the time, and there was no one on the beach to save him, no one but her. There was really no way he could get back in. She was sure of it. But she limped her way up to the remains of the beach party campfire, plucked up the largest of the charred logs just the same. Then she stood out there with her shadow trailing out behind her and just watched. 12. I suppose I prefer to think that. He lasted a long time. She had no idea exactly how long because he had taken her watch. After a while, he stopped screaming. Then he was just a white circle above the dark blot of his Izod shirt, his pale arms that were trying to fly. Then all at once he was gone. She thought there might be one more sighting of an arm surfacing like a periscope and waving around, but there wasn't. He was just gone. Club. She was actually disappointed. Later, she would be her real self again, better self maybe, but right now she wanted him to keep suffering. She wanted him to die in terror, not quickly, for Nicole, all the other nieces there might have been before Nicole. Am I a niece now? She supposed in a way she was. The last niece. The one who had run as fast as she could. The one who had survived. She sat down by the ruins of the campfire, cast that burned butt end of the log away. Probably wouldn't have made a very good weapon anyhow. Probably would have shattered like an artist's charcoal stick when she fetched him the first lick. The sun was a deepening orange, kindling the western horizon. Soon the horizon would catch fire. Not literally catch fire, but just look like, a really nice sunset. Yeah, sunset. She thought about Henry. She thought about Amy. There was nothing there. But there had been once something as beautiful as a double rainbow over the beach. And that was nice to know, nice to remember. She thought of her father. Soon, she would get up and trudge down to the grass shack, call him. Not yet. Not quite yet. Top of the next column. For now, it was all right to sit with her feet planted in the sand and her aching arms around her drawn-up knees. The waves came in. There was no sign of her torn blue shorts or Pickering's red golf shirt. The gulf had taken them both. Had he drowned? She supposed that was the likeliest thing, but the way he had gone down so suddenly, without so much as a final wave, I think something got him, she said to the deepening air. I suppose I prefer to think that. God knows why. Because you're human, sweetie, her father said. Only that. She supposed it was true, and that simple. In a horror movie, Pickering would make one last stand, either come roaring out of the surf or be waiting for her, dripping, but still his old lively self in the bedroom closet when she got back. But this wasn't a horror movie. It was her life, her own little life. She would live it, starting with the long, limping walk, maybe important, walk right there back to where there was a house and a key to fit it hidden in a Sucrette's box under that ugly gnome with the faded red hat. She would use it, and she would use a telephone too. She would call her father, then she would call the police. Later, she supposed she would call Henry. She guessed Henry still had the right to know she was all right, although he would not always although he would not always, I'm messing this up. Although he would not have it always. Okay, that's how you read it. So maybe a little foreshadowing as, their two lives are going to drift apart. Or she guessed, even want to have it. So Henry might move on too. On the Gulf, 3 pelicans swooped low, skimming the water, then rose, looking down. She watched them, holding her breath as they reached a point of perfect equilibrium in the orange air. Her face, mercifully, she didn't know this, was that of the child who might have lived to climb trees. Oh, that line gets me every time. Oh, that's a hard one. Basically, to me, let me hang on. We'll get that there. To me, let's bring this up. Of course, Amy didn't live, but had she lived, Amy might have looked like her mom. So that, as a dad, that kind of gets me right there. But all right, back to the gruesome stuff here. 3 birds folded their wings and dove in formation. Emily applauded, even though it hurt her swollen right wrist, and cried, "Yo, pelicans!" I don't understand why she does that, but then she wiped her arm across her eyes, pushed back her hair, got to her feet, and began to walk home. And that's the end. That's the end. But I think it's important that Stephen King had her, walk home. Excuse me. Yeah, so in class, maybe we could have a little discussion on what you think that means. It's pretty final, I think, right? She's going to move on with her life. Oh, we can have a discussion. All that stuff. All right. Excuse me. That's annoying. I still have one more article to read, too. All right. What is genocide? We'll talk about that after.